Sod it, I'll have just one. What harm can it do? Do you find yourself repeating this phrase only to never end up having just one, to always have more, and to end up falling flat on your face every time? Maybe you're feeling frustrated, angry, and even ashamed at yourself because everything else in your life is pretty good. You've got a good job, you're a compassionate and kind husband or wife, you care for your children, and you feel like you've got it together. But when it comes to alcohol, you just can't control it. And it's this one thing that really impacts your life and stops you from progressing or leveling up. So in some ways you're achieving a lot, but you know that alcohol is holding you back from truly living your best life. You know, you could be fitter, you could be healthier, you could level up at work, and you could be a kinder and more compassionate parent or partner, even though you're doing okay. But try not to be disheartened, because even though alcohol has a grip over you and it's this one thing that you can't seem to get control of, there are some good reasons why alcohol is causing so many problems. And there are some good reasons why you can't moderate your drinking and why you can't have just one. If you're new here, my name's Dr. Hayley Trower, and I'm a research psychologist and a sobriety and wellness coach, and I help men and women to quit drinking so that they can level up and create success in their health and in their career. If you feel inspired by what I have to say, then please do subscribe and like this video, because it helps me to reach more people. So in today's video, I want to share with you 3 reasons why you can't have just one drink if you've got a drinking habit. So the first reason, number 1, is that alcohol is physiologically addictive. It's the 5th most addictive substance on the planet, and it's also the leading cause of death and disease globally. But despite that, we still live in this culture where drinking too much is normalized, and that's because alcohol is so addictive and we don't want to face the harm and the negative consequences of alcohol, because we all love it so much because we're so addicted to it. So what happens when we drink alcohol? When you drink alcohol, it triggers a rush of dopamine in the brain and in the body, and we feel this as pleasure. And this pleasure is something that we want to keep seeking out again and again and again. Except the problem is that that dopamine rush does not last very long, and the brain and the body works very hard to normalize the levels of dopamine so that the brain and the body can be in a state of homeostasis, which is your natural resting state. So when you're in homeostasis, you're feeling pretty stabilized, everything's functioning optimally, everything's functioning normally, you're not hungry, you're not thirsty, you're not tired, you're not angry or stressed, you're just calm, your body temperature is right, and there's no stress to the body or the brain. Dopamine is a naturally occurring chemical in the brain and body, and other chemicals like adrenaline, cortisol, dopamine and serotonin, these are all produced naturally, and they all play a really important role in the functioning of the brain and body, except we're not supposed to be experiencing them for long periods of time. So when we drink alcohol and it gives us this enormous rush of dopamine that is actually an abnormally high amount of dopamine, that's much higher than the sorts of levels that are produced naturally in the brain and body, it means that the body very quickly wants to revert to homeostasis to reduce the levels of dopamine in the brain and body. And so what happens is when you have just one drink, you get this dopamine spike, but then the pleasure the dopamine plummets to levels that were actually below baseline. So the dopamine levels are below what they were before you had your first drink. And this can lead over time to anxiety and depression. But this means that you want to keep reaching that high, so then you want another drink to reach those levels of dopamine. And you want yet another high and yet another high, and you'll keep drinking more and more and more. And over time, this actually builds a tolerance, which means that you need more levels of alcohol, higher amounts of alcohol, to reach that same dopamine high that you got initially when you first started drinking. So this is one of the reasons why it's really hard to have just one. And that's because when you have that initial rush of dopamine and then it starts to plummet, you want more. You want that rush again. You keep wanting to reach that high and you keep wanting to feel that rush. And you don't want to feel anxious and depressed, which is a natural outcome of alcohol, which is why you probably drink until you go to bed. Reason 2 is that alcohol actually impairs the part of the brain that's associated with self-control. So when you have a drinking habit and you're trying to have just one drink, you're trying to moderate your drinking, it means that you're trying to break a habit. And in order to break a habit, you need to engage the part of the brain that's associated with self-control. And that means using conscious effort to change your behaviour. A habit is an automatic, non-conscious type of behaviour. So when you're trying to change a habit, that's why self-control is really important, and willpower, because without it, you will not be able to change the habit. So you might be really good at exerting self-control in other parts of your life. You might be good at resisting chocolate, or you might be good at resisting too much Diet Coke or too much shopping. But the problem is that alcohol actually impairs that part of the brain. It slows down the functioning of that part of the brain. So if you're trying to change your drinking whilst you're drinking, it's kind of not going to happen. So a good analogy might be it's about as useful as a chocolate teapot, or if you're trying to drive while blindfolded, or if you're trying to wash your clothes with dirty water, you're trying to change your drinking whilst you're drinking. It's just not going to happen. It's practically impossible. So that's reason number 2 why you can't have just one drink if you've got a drinking habit or a drinking addiction. Number 3, alcohol is psychologically addictive. So when we drink alcohol, it's physiologically addictive. It's got that pull of the dopamine rush. It also impairs the part of the brain that's associated with self-control, and it impairs and slows down lots of other parts of the brain. So we're left with this kind of pleasurable, woozy, numb feeling. And when we are experiencing emotional suffering, whether that's trauma or stress or anxiety or pain or hurtful memories or anything, any sort of emotional discomfort, sometimes it feels easier to just drink alcohol to feel that woozy pleasure instead of feeling that emotional discomfort. The problem is that we get too used to numbing our emotional suffering, and then it ends up that we don't know how to regulate our feelings properly, and instead we try to regulate our feelings with alcohol. So alcohol starts to become the only emotional regulation toolbox that we have, and it becomes our comfort blanket and our familiarity and our best friend and the thing that stops us from feeling lonely. But the problem is that alcohol just creates an illusion that it's solving this problem. It's not really our best friend. It's more like an evil friend. It's not really stopping us from feeling lonely. It's probably isolating us further because we feel the shame, because it has control over us. So that's why we become psychologically addicted. And so what happens is that the more we drink alcohol, the more potential we have for experiencing anxiety, depression, and sadness. The more potential we have then for feeling ashamed and frustrated, the more hungover we feel, and then the more we want our emotional crutch, which is also alcohol, to make us to feel better, to help us to feel better. And so we're feeding this cycle, we're stoking that fire, and it's never going to go out if we keep drinking alcohol to solve our problems, which are caused by alcohol in the first place. So those are my 3 reasons for why you can't have just one drink if you're addicted to alcohol or if you have a drinking habit. I hope this video was useful. I'd really like to know your thoughts and your feelings about this. If you have any aha moments, please let me know in the comments, and I'd love to read your comments.